And all the who's down in Whoville will cry, boo hoo hoo. That's what we're talking about today as we continue with our sermon series called Nostalgia. We're looking at the family roots of Jesus at Christmas. We have a verse that we've been going through during this time, and it's there to it just hits us with all those nostalgic feels of Christmas time. It just makes us want to wrap gifts and go to Christmas parties and go shopping, right? It's Matthew 1, verse 1. It says, in the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Yeah, that's it. That's the stuff that just makes me want to turn down my AC down to 68, put on a Christmas sweater, get a hot cup of cocoa, and watch some Christmas movies, right? No. It does nothing for us. That's not part of our Christmas stories. But the original first century Hebrews that would have been hearing that, they're like, that's our story. It's the story about our God and our people and how God is working through to save everybody. And it would have brought back all these old nostalgic feels from them. And so we talked about son of David and son of Abraham. And today we're looking at David's actual son, Solomon. And what do you know about Solomon? He was a good king, right? Was he? Was Solomon all that good? And Solomon ruled God's people with wisdom and zeal. At the very beginning of his rule, God asked him, you can have whatever you want. And he's like, oh God, well, I just want wisdom to be able to rule your people as best as I can. And wisdom is what he had. He used that wisdom to overcome domestic disputes. There's that famous story about two women coming up who said they were both mothers of the same baby. And he's like, well, we could just cut the baby in half and you guys have there. He used his wisdom to solve that problem. And he also used his wisdom to write over 3,000 proverbs. He used it to write over 1,000 songs. And he was a man who got things done. He finally built and dedicated the temple of the Lord in all of its splendor, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple at its dedication. And he ruled with all sorts of power and might over that unified kingdom of Israel. And he ruled so well that rulers from all over and the nations around him flocked to see his true power. Solomon was truly one that was powerful and awesome. And this makes me think of like the Christmas past and how perfect Christmas pasts have been, right? At least that's how I remember them. You know, when you're thinking about all the gifts wrapped underneath the tree and how beautiful it is. I mean, some of my best memories are around opening up gifts, or my friends or family opening up gifts around Christmas. It's an incredible time. You can remember waking up in the morning and people are grabbing cameras to shoot pictures, and it's all just to remember it. Everything about the season it seems so perfect back then. And as we look at Solomon, it seems like everything is absolutely perfect. After all, the glory of the Lord fills the temple he just built. All the nations are flocking to him in his power. Even the Queen of Sheba comes to check this amazing thing out, to see his wisdom, to see his power. She had heard these stories about the amazing Solomon of Israel and decided to come and test him with incredibly difficult questions. But when the Queen of Sheba comes, she's not just like, oh, I'm here. No, she comes rolling when the wealthiest spice trader of the world comes rolling into your town. She's flaunting her wealth, making it rain everywhere she goes, right? She is showing off her grandeur and power. And she is even amazed at Solomon. He answers all of her questions with ease and with flawlessness. It says this about it here in 1 Kings chapter 10. When the Queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon and the palace that he had built, the food on his table, the seating of the officials, the attending servants in their robes, his cupbearers, the burnt offerings he made at the temple of the Lord, she was overwhelmed. Whoa, my goodness. Like everything she had heard about Solomon was true. I would have never believed it unless I saw it with my own two eyes. She's so impressed that she begins to remark about the impressiveness right in front of him. Okay, so I want you to pay attention to what she says next. This is verse 8. We just read 4 through 6. This is just down the line a little bit, but I want you to pay careful, close attention here. She says this, "How happy your people must be. How happy your officials who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom. Praise be the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and placed you on the throne of Israel. Because the Lord's eternal love for Israel, he has made you king to maintain justice and righteousness." What does that sound like? What, like, in all honesty, what does that sound like? Sounds kind of like thick praise, right? But what is this praise about? What is this praise about? To me, like, have you ever heard someone like praise a dictator? They're like, "Oh, you're the best leader ever. I've never seen anyone that makes the best decisions like you do, oh king, oh dictator, oh mighty one." Like, I've never seen any of that. It almost starts coming off of that old story about the king with no clothes. You know, like, "Oh, those are the best robes I've ever seen." Like, there's just everyone around becomes yes men and all that. This kind of has that thick, plastic praise as that. And think about the ego trip that Solomon would be on because of this. I mean, she's even saying, "Oh, how grateful your servants must be to be your servants." That's a funny line there. Like, it's super flattering language from this incredibly powerful queen. And she ends up giving him a whole bunch of wealth. And with that, it all starts falling apart. Now, I'm about to read another verse to you from 1 Kings chapter 10, but before I read it, I need to make sure that you're in the right kind of headspace, that you kind of know what's going on. So remember that book, Revelation? And remember the bad number in that book, the number of the beast, right? You know, remember that? Remember what that number is? Okay, I'm going to read this, and this is right after the Queen of Sheba gives them all that stuff. This is right underneath there. So this is 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 14. "And the weight of the gold that Solomon received yearly was 666 talents. It's like 666. What? Over there? Like, no way. Like, what is going on here? And it kind of wakes you up, because in the Bible there are good numbers and there are bad numbers. An example of a good number would be like 7. And it's like 7 days of creation. It kind of means complete. And like 12 is a good number, but 6 kind of means incomplete, not quite finished. It's kind of one of those bad numbers. 13 is also a bad number. Like 12 is good because of disciples, because of God's people, the 12 tribes of Israel, all those things. And we continue going on. There's bad number after bad number. You can read this on your own time. He had 600 shekels, and he ended up making a huge ivory and gold throne for himself. And on the throne had 6 steps up to it. The biblical authors are going, "Hey, do you see something's not right here?" Like, these numbers are bad, and we're seeing the downfall of Solomon as we read this. In the next chapter, the very next part of the reading, the Bible makes it clear. It talks about all these wives that he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. That's 10. That means kind of all completion. That's everybody, right? Like that they caused his downfall. But and I heard a lot of people make really poor jokes right here. They're like, "Oh yeah, see, it's those women folk. They'll take you down. Like, don't have those wives." Those jokes are stupid. That's not what it means. What it means is how the biblical authors describe it, is that he didn't love his wives like, "Oh, I love Priscilla and Aquila and all those people." Like, no. He loves his wives like he loves possessions, is how it describes it. And when you realize that it's all about the stuff, you back out, because we're in chapter 11 now, you back out to 9, 10, and 11, those 3 chapters, and you see that Solomon's just amassing stuff. Yeah, he built the altar, he built the temple of the Lord, and it was great and magnificent, but we end up seeing that he builds the temple of the Lord with slave labor, which is a huge no-no. God says, never do that. Never do that. Especially don't do it when you're building the temple of the Lord. And then he continues doing it because slave labor is cheap labor, and he can get more and more and more if he exploits people, right? And he's building, using slave labor to build all these things around him, and he's getting accolades from all of these people. The downfall of Solomon isn't just his wives, but is wanting more and more and more, using cheap labor and accolades and wives to look more and more powerful. You see, he's all about the stuff. And this is like how the Grinch stole Christmas, right? Like the Grinch, what does he think Christmas is all about? It's all about the stuff, all the presents, the dinners, the gatherings, how that's what Christmas is all about. So much so that he hears the Who's down in Whoville getting ready for it. He goes down and steals all the stuff as like a reverse green Christmas Santa, right? Like he goes down and steals the dinners and the presents and the trees. He takes everything because he thinks Christmas is all about the stuff. And we see Solomon was distracted by everything that was around him, his 700 wives, his 300 concubines, his slave labor, his power. And before you know it, that lust for power and things and stuff began to destroy him and destroy everything. And it all comes tumbling down as his love for himself and all these things moves him to start worshiping after other gods who can give him what he actually wants. Man, and how easy is it for us to make Christmas all about the things, like all about the stuff that's around us. And it's a cliche statement, it gets used all the time, but it says, keep Christ in Christmas. But so often we think it's about all the gifts, all the decorations, about all the perfect celebrations with large amounts of family all around us. One thing I think this year has really revealed about us is that we often make our celebration of Christmas about everything that Christmas isn't actually about. And we do this in life too, you know, we want power and glory for ourselves. We lust after the promotion or that wife. We think that new purchase will finally complete us. You know, whatever prize finally makes us feel good. And we end up missing out on the things that Jesus cared about. And I think that was actually the downfall of Solomon. So did you know that Jesus actually talks about Solomon? He talks about Solomon at the same time that he talks about Nineveh, and it's kind of this backwardsness of the kingdom of God, that you think that you're righteous in your power and glory and what you have, but actually, like, Nineveh is going to judge, like the Queen of Sheba is going to judge. So let's read what Jesus says. It's from Matthew chapter 12. The Queen of the South, that Queen of Sheba, will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. For she came from the ends of the earth to hear wisdom of Solomon. And behold, something greater than Solomon is here. Jesus says that something greater than Solomon is here. How could that be? Well, we know how it is. Solomon fell apart, looking after riches, going after what the other kings of the world had, going after the great and mighty things, looking for greatness in all the places where we should be looking for God and the humbleness. Jesus says someone greater is actually here. And Jesus, unlike Solomon, isn't all about himself. He isn't about those glory and those riches, but rather he is about giving glory away to other people. He's about sacrificing himself so that others like you and me may actually live. So when Solomon couldn't actually finish it, even with all of his wisdom and how he started off with everything and he just kind of pittered off into nothing, even though he couldn't finish it, Jesus says it is finished on the cross so that you and I may have life. Someone greater than Solomon is here. And he is the one that is restoring all things. And he gives of himself to everyone. And the Grinch sees what Christmas is all about. he realizes what the true meaning of Christmas is. And I love how the story of how the Grinch stole Christmas ends. So I'm just going to read. Then the Who's down in Whoville will cry, boo-hoo. That's a noise, grinned the Grinch, that I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put a hand to his ear. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, the sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so. It was merry, very. Every who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. It hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came somehow or other. It came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could this be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. Then the Grinch thought of something that he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little more. I love the ending of the Grinch as we skip down just a little bit. Then that Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light. And he brought back the toys and the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. So despite all the mess, all the consumerism, all the people that are looking for power for just themselves, at Advent and Christmas, we celebrate that there is something greater and that it has come. And that nothing, no matter how hard it tries, can stop Christmas. Because the original Christmas was almost a nothing event. Just a baby born to unknown parents in a small manger in the backside of a house in a town that wasn't known for being much of anything. But that baby, when he grows, gives glory to you and me. So this Christmas, things may seem a little different. It may even seem like the Grinch stole all of your Christmas parties. There won't be any large concerts. There won't be any big church services or large gatherings. But we have one that is greater than all. And he has already come. So maybe with this Grinch of a year, you'll see that Christmas is coming oh so near. And see now that he is more than what can be bought at the store. And Christmas may mean just a little bit more. Have a great week, everybody.